Let's talk about it. The recent piece from the Wall Street Journal that came out this weekend. Before we get started, I just want to say that one of the things that I have been talking about for the last few months is how it doesn't seem like we can have a real conversation about Harry and Meghan and the decisions that they make and the work that they do without it devolving into shouts about being a stan or a hater, personal attacks, and then it just falls apart from there. I think this article, while not perfect, gives an opportunity to have some real discussions about Harry and Meghan's work post-British royal family, and also the state of Hollywood in general. I know what I am going to say is going to bother some people. All I ask, and I know it's a big ask, is that you listen to the video all the way through. Perhaps read the article. I definitely suggest it because it's only my interpretation of the article that you're hearing. And maybe we can have some good, productive conversations. I hope. I'm already kind of regretting this, but let's go. I can't in good faith talk about this article without telling you that I know one of the authors. My college roommate was best friends with Eric. They grew up together in Pennsylvania. He was a familiar face that we would see in our slightly lopsided Beacon Hill apartment junior year. And I'm actually glad that I read the piece first before reading who wrote it. I've been trying to read pieces before reading who wrote them, just so I can kind of have as unbiased of a viewpoint as possible. Eric is not a royal family reporter. He won the Scripps Award for his work in environmental journalism before moving over to discuss Hollywood and the film industry. I'm not here to read his entire resume, but just give you a little bit of background. This doesn't mean that everything written in here is correct. And we're going to start off with a glaring problem with this article, which is more so a glaring problem with digital media. The headline sucks. I bristled at the headline because the headline is designed for you to feel something, positive or negative. So this headline is Harry and Meghan produce a Hollywood flop themselves. That's going to make you feel some type of way. But what this article to me is really about is, can Harry and Meghan make it in Hollywood without relying on their personal story? Their personal story has been their launch board. It's been very successful. What's next? It's also a story about startup growing pains, about the state of Hollywood and streaming and the podcast industry and how things have changed. And it's focused on Harry and Meghan because they're in the news because of their split with Spotify. Let's dive into some of the key parts. Again, this is just my point of view. I really encourage you to read the article. If you hit sign in and you subscribe or register for free, you can read it, okay? There is a paywall, but you can work around it for this article. The piece opens up about this documentary that H&M wanted to make about misinformation. Reportedly, a team assigned to the job, so again, this is secondhand information, went to speak with them about it. They had tons of questions. Is this a series or is it a film? Historical or contemporary? Would Harry and Meghan appear in it? Allegedly, the couple had few answers to these questions. And allegedly, this documentary idea faded away. Harry and Meghan are relatively new to this world. Yes, Meghan was on a TV show, but having a production company, executing these big ideas, knowing who needs to be in place, what needs to be in place, is a totally different ballgame. And as an Archwell spokesperson told the Wall Street Journal, quote, "New companies often make changes in their startup phase, both with people and strategy, and we are no exception. We're more equipped, focused, and energized than ever before." They've had their own growing pains and issues, which any startup production company is going to have. The difference is it's tied to two very big names. So every little misstep or lost deal is hyper-focused on by the media, picked apart for larger clues about what this means for their brand. Besides the podcast Archetypes, which did extremely well, what they have produced that has just broken records, done extremely well, has been the Harry and Meghan documentary and Prince Harry's memoir Spare. Both of these things are about their personal story and their ties to the British royal family. They quote biographer Andrew Morton in this piece, who says, "Once you've launched your bombshell, what's next?" And that's a fair question. How do you make a successful pivot away from your personal story? I think a forgiving look at this could be that Harry and Meghan are trying to figure out what their brand is, what long-term their vision is for their production company. They just happen to be doing it with the eyes of the entire world on them. As the piece says, quote, "The couple shows they could mine their personal stories. Prince Harry's memoir Spare became a bestseller, and the 6-part documentary they produced for Netflix about their break with the royal family proved popular. That aside, they have struggled to make content that stretched beyond their own experiences, end quote. But this piece doesn't leave out the larger factors at play that Harry and Meghan have no control over. Quote, when they struck deals with Netflix and Spotify in 2020, streaming services were booming and executives were rushing to secure content and feed consumer demand at any cost, end quote. The Sussexes came along with Malala, the Obamas, etc., signing these deals with these offers fielded from Hollywood that, quote, had few guidelines on what would come next. Currently, there is slower growth for streaming services like Netflix and also Spotify. Cuts have been made. Costs are being trimmed. It has this to say specifically about Netflix, quote, after booming during the early part of the pandemic, Netflix subscriber growth began to stagnate as streaming competition ramped up and consumers resumed more regular lives. Netflix is still recovering from a sharp drop in stock in 2022 after it announced its first quarter of subscriber losses in a decade, end quote. It also discusses Spotify and the hundreds of people that have been laid off. Not because of Harry and Meghan, but because of a change in the appetite and environment of podcasting. In some ways, the article concedes that Harry and Meghan are caught up in something bigger than themselves. Something I wish the article had gotten into, though, was the deal that Meghan signed with WME and just what the impacts of signing with WME could have on their current contracts in Hollywood or where they're headed. I think that was a crucial piece that was left out because it seems like part of the problem might have been at the beginning that they just didn't have the right people around them that were experienced in understanding everything that went into these deals and what was expected. I feel like with the influx of new people to Archwell and this new deal with WME, maybe that should smooth out some of those problems before signing deals. Interestingly, the article does bring up that Netflix is unlikely to renew their deal with the couple when it comes up in 2025. But later on, the article also quotes a Netflix spokesperson who had this to say, that they valued the partnership with Archwell and noted that Harry and Meghan was its biggest documentary debut. We'll continue to work together on a number of projects, she said. There does seem to be an attempt to get different people on the record to give a fuller picture of what might have happened here or is happening here. Granted, everyone is unnamed, so that's something to keep in mind. And there could be different motivations for having these quotes out there. These quotes also could have been put out there with the hope that it would help drive the conversation of renegotiations that I'm assuming are starting to happen between Harry and Meghan and Netflix about what happens post-2025. So there's a lot of things to consider here with some of the sources. It kind of reminds me of when someone has a massive hit, say in the country genre, and then they try to pivot to pop. Is it going to work? Is it going to play out? Can people see them as anything other than a country singer? And that kind of feels like where Harry and Meghan are right now. They know they can make a killing off of their personal story, off of their connection to the British royal family. But how do they parlay that into something else? How do they parlay that into something bigger, into something that is not tangentially tied to them? And again, this is only through the framework of Hollywood. This is not, can Meghan wear something and go out and sell it out immediately? Yes, she can. This is not about if there's interest in the couple. There clearly is. It's about, can they make this pivot where people are still interested in what they produce, even if it has nothing to do with them? In a year, we might be able to look back at this piece and say it was just a growing pain. Look where they are now. And yes, this article from the headline has a decidedly negative slant. But the Wall Street Journal is Murdoch owned. It is a conservative paper. And also, outrage sells. More likely to perform well on social media and get picked up by the algorithms and pushed to more people so it can elicit more outrage and hate because that's what people reply to. This piece is not perfect. I think there are things that have been left out, but I do think there is a basis for a really good conversation that we could have about where Harry and Meghan go next. But I understand with the nature of social media, that is a very difficult conversation to have, especially because people have very strong feelings about this couple. Thank you for listening all the way through.